So I'm going to actually skip over the enemies and the troops section for now, because that's a whole big thing in and of itself, and pretty separate from these parts that we've been going over here. But I'm going to jump down to this states one, and we're going to take a look at that. So here we have a list of states. These are basically status effects that can befall your players for better or worse, your characters, and your enemies too, and the enemies in the game. So here we just have a list of the ones that the game starts with, and then again you can change the maximum or anything like that. So let's just go over everything here as best I can here. In the general settings we have the name, so whatever you want to call it, name of the state. That's pretty simple. Again, the icon, so this one's knockout, so this is when one of your party members falls in battle and they need to be revived or whatever, so it uses the skull and crossbones icon here appropriately. And then we have restriction here, so it says the restriction on actions. So it says when this is set to a state other than none, command input will not be accepted, and only the action that has been set will be performed. When there are overlapping restrictions, the one at the bottom of the list takes precedence. Okay, so basically what happens with these, and I'll just show you. So you can set none, and that would be, nothing would happen with that. There'd be no restriction. But if you choose any of these other ones, then the player will not be in control of any of this, of that character's actions while they're under this state. So our options there for for these restrictions are attack an enemy, attack anyone, attack an ally, or cannot move. So and we'll look at all those individually as we go through these, each of these states. But for this one, it's cannot move, and that makes sense because this character would be essentially, temporarily taken out of the battle. They wouldn't be able to, perform the normal actions or anything. So that's what this cannot move option does, and makes it so that character's turn is skipped, and you go to the next character or whatever. Priority here, it says priority for displaying state icons. When multiple states have been applied, the state that has a higher value for this setting will be given display priority. And when priority is the same, the one with the lower ID is given preference. So the IDs it's talking about are these over here, the numbers. Higher up the list it is, lower the ID number. So for this, the way that the default battle system works is it only has one spot available to show an icon for, I think it's only one anyway, if I remember right, to show an icon for a state. So if a character is under two different states at the same time, for example, maybe they're poisoned and blinded, by both of these states, then if those priorities are the same, then the poison icon will be the one showing because it's the lower ID number, like it was just saying here. Otherwise, you can control that specifically with this number. So you could say, like, hey, I always want blindness to show up. That's like the most important one that I want people to see if they have it on their character. So I'll make that one higher value priority than any of the rest of these. And then no matter what, it'll be like if they have 5 different states at the same time, theoretically, then blindness will be the one that the icon shows for. So it's kind of a complicated thing for something that's like seemingly simple, but I think it's just because they only have so much real estate as far as the screen goes. Like they only have so much space to work with for each character's status and things in the battle. And so they couldn't list 10 different icons at once or whatever if there's a lot of states going on. So, and there are plugins out there for this that you can install that will change that behavior. And I know for sure that I've seen ones where if they have multiple states, it'll just cycle through all of them periodically. Like if you've got 3 things going, it'll show poison icon for a couple seconds, and then the blind icon, and then the silence icon, and then that way you can say, oh, I've got 3 states on, and it's a little bit easier to gauge that visually. And I'm sure there's other ones out there too that do different things with states to help them be a little bit more obvious and apparent. But by default, that's more or less how it works, and there are limitations there, of course. So Anyway, moving on, we have this next section here that says SV motion, so side view motion is what that's talking about. So it says motion type, displaying while the state is active in side view mode. So if you're using the side view battle system, while this particular knockout ability or state is active, it will show, it says normal, abnormal, sleep, and dead. Those are your options for which set of character sprites will be shown on screen. And that correlates back to, if you remember the actor section, when we looked briefly at the side view battlers, and there were some where they were, hunched over or, laying on the ground in the case of the dead one. That correlates to those particular lines of, in the character sprites for the side view battles. So you can, determine that way, which graphics you'd like to use per each different state. And some of them you won't want to change. You'll just want it to do normal. And then that means the character will just look the same as they would even without the state happening to them. But if you really want to fine tune it, you could set it up to where you have a specific specific graphic for each state for your character if you wanted to, if you wanted to get that specific about it. At least to an extent you can do that, I think. There might be some limitations there as well, but yeah, or if you wanted to look at a different one, like if you wanted any effect maybe to use the sleep or the abnormal or something like that, then you could set that as well. And then similarly here, to do with the side view battle system, we have the SV overlay. It says overlay image displaying while the state is active in side view mode. So there's none for this, but you could do poison, blind, silence, rage. So here's how you can add, in the side view battle system, you can add some more visual effects to help the player determine what's going on with their character state and everything. And each one of these kind of has its own look to it, and so it would help distinguish, like, oh, that's what animation plays when there's poison happening, or no, that's the rage animation, so my character's in rage, and you can see that a little bit more visually in the side view setup. So now we have this next section that says removal conditions. It says conditions for state removal apart from using skills and items. So skills and items can remove states, of course, as we saw a little bit earlier in the item section. But on top of that, you have different ways that that either over time or by something else happening, you may remove that state from the character. Like this one right here, it says remove at battle end. So it specifies that the state is valid only in battle. So at battle end, if you use that, then, like, say for example, if you use that for knockout, then all your characters that are passed out or knocked out, whatever, as long as there was still one character left in your party that was not in knockout status and you ended up successfully completing that battle, then all the characters that had knockout would have that state removed when you got back from the battle. And then here we have another option that says remove by restriction. It says it will be replaced by a new state with a different action restriction. So I think this is mainly for if a state has to take priority over another one. So for example, knockout might be one that could take priority over it. Let's see, let me read that. It will be replaced by a new state with a different action restriction. So yeah, I'm pretty sure it's some kind of so like if there was something that was a little bit more priority wise that took over, like maybe it would be like what would it even be? Let's see. So like say for example you have poison or something already on a character, and then then you wanted knockout to take precedence. It's like, well, they don't need to be poisoned anymore once they're knocked out, so you could take remove by restriction for poison maybe, and then that might have the knockout just take precedence, something like that. But I'm not really sure. That might not be exactly correct. It's a little bit vague on how that's listed, on how exactly you would use that. But let's see. Let me just go through the rest of these really briefly here, and then we'll actually look at the ones as we go down, because some of these will actually use some of these options, and then we can look a little more closely. But it says auto removal timing. It says removal timing for the state that is effective for a set number of turns. So if you want something to not last for the whole battle, then that's how you would do that. Same with the duration in turns. It's grayed out here because it applies to this, and you'd have to have something besides none in there. Remove by damage. It says removes the state at the specified probability when the target suffers some sort of damage. So that usually would be for states like confusion, fascination, sleep, stuff like that. Maybe rage too, depending on your game. And that typically happens where it's like if the character's in some kind of altered state, but you want to have some kind of ability to like snap them out of it from damage, from taking damage or something, then that's that's where that would commonly be. We'll probably see it when we get down to those. And then this is a kind of an unusual one. This says remove by walking. It says remove the state after walking the specified number of steps on the map screen. So the game actually, RPG Maker actually keeps track of the number of steps that the character walks, and they can use it in different, on the map and things. And they can use it in different ways, and this is one way that you could do that. I can see this being useful for things like poison, for example, because after a while you might want the poison to like wear off, and then the character stops losing their hit points or whatever, and then you can facilitate that here, just to say like, okay, well, if they had it on the map screen, and after a while if they walk around, I don't want them to like completely run out of health, so maybe after they take 30 steps or something, and then it could wear off or that sort of thing. And you could even do a combined thing with like remove by timing, like different turns in the battle. So it could be like, okay, 3 turns in the battle or 30 steps on the map, and then if either of those things happens, then the poison goes away, that sort of thing. And down here we have the messages section, and this is just it says messages to be displayed in battle, not displayed if left blank. So this is just like related to what happens with with different things. So it says if an actor is inflicted with the state, then it'll say target name, which in this case would be your character, and it says your character's name has fallen, and then if an enemy is afflicted with the state, then that would be your enemy name. So it'll say your slime is slain, or whatever whatever your your enemy name is slain or whatever. And you can change these obviously if you don't like the default ones. And this is if the state persists. We'll see this when we get down to sleep. I think that's the only one by default that has something listed in there. But this is if it's something that lasts for multiple turns, and then you need a different message besides these ones here to explain it. And then it says if the state is removed, so it'll say target name revives in the case of knockout. So, and then over here we've got something kind of interesting going on for this particular state. It says it's a SP parameter, and it says experience times 0. So times 0, so 0% experience. So what that's doing is it's basically saying while this state is active, so while a character is knocked out, in other words, they will not gain experience. So that's something you could choose to remove in your game if you don't want it to work that way, or you can change the percentage. Say you want them to only gain like half the normal experience or something like that. You could do that there. But what so if you say you had no way to revive a character in your party, and you had to carry on for a little while with them in the knockout state, with this set this way, the only characters that would gain experience from future battles and encounters and things would be the ones that aren't knocked out. So because of this stipulation here, this trait. And then finally for this one in the note, it says state number 1 will be automatically added when HP reaches 0. So just like with the skills when we looked at the attacks and and guard skills and things like that, this first 0001 knockout, whatever this skill is here, whatever you do with this, is going to trigger when the character's health is at 0. So if you want something a little different to happen when your characters fall in battle or whatever, then you can change this 001 state. So let's start looking at the rest of these here. So here we have a guard state. And this is just one that, I guess this is what the character goes into when they use like the guard skill or that sort of thing. It's the name, and then here you can see there's no icon associated with it. Probably because this is just going to be used from the guard ability on, well, I mean, you could set an icon if you wanted to. Like, you could maybe set the same one as the guard skill if you wanted to show, like, hey, they're guarding, but it's up to you. So there's no restriction on this one. So it's not going to take over control of what the player does, necessarily. Priority is 0, so it doesn't have the, because it doesn't have the icon, so it doesn't really need the priority. Motion is normal, and the overlay is normal, so nothing would change, or overlay is none, sorry, so nothing would change visually if you're using the side view battle system. And then here we have some removal conditions. So this one always removes at battle end, so it specifies that the state is valid only in battle. And then here it's got to remove by restriction, so I guess if another state, on this one, okay, so it makes sense for this, if you think about it. It says, will be replaced by a new state with a different action restriction. So if they're guarding, then you would want that to be replaced by, a poison status or something like that. Or maybe they're knocked out, then it would overtake this guard status, and that does make sense. So here we have ones with auto removal timing and the duration. So here we can say it's by default is at turn end. So when that character's turn ends, then this guard ability ends, which makes sense because you'd want them to guard for one turn, and then after that, you'd want them to perform, you'd want to have the player be able to perform a different action if they chose. But you could also choose action in too. Or you could choose none, which is what, the knockout thing had. So action in would just be like as soon as they perform that action, then it would go away. But in this case, you want it to last till the end of the turn because they're guarding for the whole turn. So, and it says duration in turns. And it says number of turns the effect of the state lasts. This is countdown processing for the number of turns is run at the end of a turn regardless of the setting. So here we've got a minimum and a maximum value basically, and that's what this little symbol here is trying to show you, but it doesn't really say that. But so in this case it goes for one turn no matter what because they're both one. But if you wanted it to last for like multiple turns, you could do maybe like 1 to 3, and then it would, I think it randomly chooses. I'm pretty sure anyway. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it randomly chooses. From some number between your minimum and your maximum duration there. And the rest of these, there's no messages related to it in this case. And then over here we've got the special flag of guard, which I believe you just need to set specifically for guarding, is all that says. Yeah, and we went over this in the traits section. The first, this is guard reduces damage taken at a set rate. So you have to flag, this as a guard ability, and I think that's just specific to this particular type of ability. So now we'll look at Immortal. So similar things here. No restrictions, no priorities, no icons. Which you could change, of course. It's always something you could change for your game if you want it a different way. So this removes that battle end, but it doesn't remove by restriction. So I guess other states are not going to take this one away, or prioritize it or whatever. It could remove that battle end, so it only lasts for the battle. There's no auto removal timing, so it lasts for the whole battle. Looks like, and it says state resist knockout. So state resist. It says completely negates a state. If knockouts are negated, characters will not be knocked out even when their HP falls to 0. So, and we talked about that originally in the, when we were looking at the traits in the actors tab and everything. But this is the ability that makes it so, as the name suggests, Immortal, that your character wouldn't die in battle if they had this state somehow. And, even if they took enough damage to get their HP down to 0. So here we're looking at poison. And we've got an icon for this one. The priority is 50 on this one, so it may or may not. Let me see if these are all 50, 50, 60, 65, 70, 75, 80. Okay, interesting. So the further down this list you go, the more priority those icons take. So that's kind of interesting. But anyway, there's no restriction on it. And then we've got some motions, so it would use the abnormal character sprite for the side view battler, and it would overlay with the poison side view option. Which, yeah, that'll make sense for these. There's no removal conditions for this, but you could, like we were talking about before, you could do, remove after a couple of turns, or, remove by walking, whatever, however you want to do it. Poisoned, and is no longer poisoned for the messages. Now, this one's kind of interesting. It says the EX parameter, HP regeneration minus 10%. So, to set that up, you would actually go in the parameters here, and then you choose the EX parameter and this HP regeneration option. Now, since this is a plus, it's only doing it in terms of an increase, but since you can use these, arrows, or you can type it in manually too, but they can actually go below 0, so that's what it does here, and it goes to minus 10%. So you're adding a minus 10%, or in other words, you're subtracting 10% of their health, per turn, or however that works. I think it's per turn. Yeah, it doesn't specifically say, but I think it only happens once per turn. So that's how you would set something like that up, and that's mainly what this is here to show you. Blindness. Let's see. Again, we've got the abnormal, and there's an overlay for blind. So this one removes at the battle end. So when the battle's over, the characters don't stay blind, but they stay poisoned. So, and you can determine for your game which of the abilities you want to persist like that, and which of the states you want to persist and which you don't. And now here we have auto removal timing. So action ends. So this one has the potential to and when at the end of your character's action. So if a blinded character at the end of their action that they made, they might lose it. They might lose the blindness ability over time. So it's a minimum of three turns and a maximum of 5. So if they've performed 5 actions for sure, and still haven't lost the the blindness ability, then by the end of their 5th action, they would lose it for sure. They would go away. So this is how you would set one up that you definitely want to, remove itself automatically over time. Resolve itself essentially. And then again, it removes at the battle end. So if the battle ends at 2 turns or whatever, or 1 turn, it still goes away. It's in the battle, that sort of thing. Or if it's at 4 turns in the battle maybe, and you still haven't lost the blindness, it still removes. Again, we have the messages. There's nothing for that one. And then here, same sort of thing as with the poison, we've got, this affects the hit rate. So it lowers the hit rate by 50%, and you set that up the same way, plus a negative 50%. So silence, kind of the same sort of setup, I'm going to guess here. Abnormal and the silence overlay. Yep, the same action end in 3 to 5. Removes at the battle end. So you get the idea here, hopefully, of how this kind of gets set up. And then in this case, it's using the traits, the seal skill type trait, and it seals magic. So we'll just briefly look at that. Again, this is temporarily disables the use of the specified type of skill. So this is how you would make it so your characters couldn't use magic skills or spells or whatever. They call them skills in this tab, but it's also spells or techniques or whatever you want to call it in the game itself. But so it seals your magic skills for that 3 to 5 turns or until the battle ends. And you could take that off if you want it to not be when the battle ends and it still have to, go through it to the next battle. You could do it that way too. Rage. Now this is getting into the ones where it starts using the restrictions. We haven't seen any of those on any of these up to this point, really. Except for Knockout had the cannot move. But Rage, you can see here, it's got, and it has its own overlay and everything, but it's got this restriction of attacking enemies, so the player won't be able to control a rage character in their party while they're in the rage state. And instead what will happen is that character will always attack a random enemy like every turn, and that will be their action for that turn, like no matter what. So even if you wanted them to, stop attacking and use an item to help one of your other characters or something, party members, they couldn't do that under rage. They'll always attack the enemy every single time, and that's what this, that's what this restriction is for, to be able to do that. So this one also removes at the battle end, and this one has the action end from 2 to 4, so it's slightly less. It could stop slightly earlier than, blind and silence and things like that. And now here we have one that says remove by damage. And again, this is remove the state at the specified probability when the target suffers some sort of damage. So in this case, it's 50%. So if they lose half of their health or more, and I believe that's their overall health. I'm not really sure. It might be 50% of what's left of their hit points. That might also be how it calculates it. It's a little bit unclear about that, and you'd probably want to test it. But if they lose more than 50%, either of their maximum or of what's left of their current, whichever way that functions, then they would be knocked out of this state. They would lose this state. It would remove the rage state, and then then the character could act normally again after that. And other than that, there's no traits or anything like that for this one. So likewise for confusion, it doesn't have that. And this one works a little differently, but it's just using the restriction to attack anyone. So where rage always attacked your enemies, confusion might attack your allies too, or your enemies. It's totally random. So you could have some, good success with that, with acting basically just like rage, where they're only attacking the enemies, or you could have it, attack only your allies if you're not so fortunate there. And again, same setup, remove a battle end, action end. It could remove itself after 2 to 4 turns, or if they take 50% damage, then they'll be knocked out of the confusion state. Now obviously you can change this yourself. Like if you wanted it to be, if they take any damage at all, they lose that ability, then you could do like 1% or something like that, so that no matter what, if they get hit, they'll fall out of that state. That would be a pretty easy way to do that, just for example. And then Fascination, just in a similar manner to Rage and Confusion, but its restriction is attack an ally. So Fascination is even more frustrating potentially for the player, because it's never going to have a chance to attack the enemies, and you're always going to attack your allies. So that's a pretty tough one, but again, it's set up pretty much the same way here, just like Confusion and Rage, with no extra traits or anything, just always attacking your allies, and you get the idea at this point, hopefully. And finally, with Sleep, this one's a little bit different than the others. So here we have a restriction of cannot move, just like we saw with Knockout. So that basically means the character won't, be able to be performing any actions at all, and the player won't have control over them. There's a specific motion for this one, in addition to the overlay. In this case, it's removed at battle end, assuming your other party members would wake you up. How you can sleep in the middle of a battle in the first place, I don't know. I guess it's magical sleep. Who knows? And then the auto removal timing at action end is from 3 to 5 turns, just like with silence, and I think it was silence, blind, and things like that. So here, remove by damage. To specify. Oh, okay. So I misunderstood this, and I just realized it. So it's a % chance to remove the state by damage. It's not a % of your health. So I apologize about that. So that explains these a little bit better. So there's a 50% chance that when they take damage, they will lose this ability. So it's not, you need to lose 50% of your health before you can. Okay, yeah, my mistake. But that's good. This helped me to catch that. Because this one, no matter what, 100% of the chance, or 100% of the time, if a character gets hit when they're in the sleep state, they will lose, they'll wake up, they'll lose the sleep state. So if they take any damage then they'll remove it. And then here, this one finally has a if the state persists message. So, and that's just because using the term falls asleep doesn't make sense if they were already asleep. So if the state persists, then it says target name, so your character name or whatever is sleeping. So if you wanted to show a different message for when, it's on turn 2 and they still have it, this is where you fill that in. So, and then here we can see the final little aspect of this is that the evasion rate gets subtracted by 100%. So, interestingly enough, I would think that would make it so that they always get hit by any attack, and then if they always get hit, then whenever they, or they always get hit by any attack that's aimed at that character, I guess. So, so I guess there's still the possibility where, that character wouldn't get targeted by the enemies, and they would still keep sleeping for the 3 or 5 turns. But if they do get hit, it'll be 100% success rate because they basically have 0 evasion rate at that point because they lose 100% of their evasion. So that pretty much covers the basic states, and there's more stuff you can do. Obviously, you've probably got some ideas by now of how to combine some of these things that haven't been, combined at this point. Like you could make one skill that does poison and blindness if you want. Call it something else. There's all sorts of ways you can fine-tune things and customize them for your own game. And again, if you need to add more, you can just change the maximums down here. But yeah, so I think that about covers it for this particular section. And, next time we can start going into some of the other ones. Maybe we'll do the enemies and troops section because that's a whole can of worms on its own. And then, animations and things like that. That'll probably warrant its own section. Probably most of these, honestly, will warrant their own section of video here. And except for maybe when we get down to these last couple, we can maybe do those all in one. But we'll see. We'll see how it plays out. Anyways, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.